The buildings lower to either side of the wide avenue out from the center of the city, as if the sky is pressing down on the stubby towers and dusty light-bleached displays of cheap cakes and party supplies, rooms of repurposed furniture, the offices of photocopier servicers and failing notaries. A man, let's call him a man, walked this route. He considered that predatory sky. He did not shake his head in this epoch. He abjured most extraneous motions. But he blinked quickly, and if you had known him well, you might have recognized in that a sign that his own fancies intrigued him. He was a tall and solid man, and had those he passed observed him, most would have considered him white. He wore a gray bomber jacket and black jeans, and his dark hair gusted around his beard and downcast face. Far behind him, the mirror glass of banks and finance and rentier towers, facades of blocky white and off-white stone in vulgar mummery of some imagined Greece, faux obsidian, hotels named sans serif for characters from local fables, unloved by dissidents. By small parks the thoroughfare narrowed, overwatched by apartment buildings called greystones in the local tongue. For the brownstones of New York they faintly resembled. The sun was cool and very bright behind clouds, so the pedestrians that passed the traveler were announced, or followed by long vague shadows. People sat on stoops by bodegas, and bickered and played dice, ignored him. A priest smoked a sagging cigarette at the door to a corrugated iron church. He nodded a wary greeting to which the man responded in kind. Two boys sifting through metal trash at the gates of a reclamation yard paused at his approach. The man did not look at them, and they whispered, their observations drowned out by the complaints of a car being crushed. "Boys, leave that man be. That man does not kill children anymore when he can avoid doing so, but still, leave him alone." The boys were shrewd, like the feral dogs that watched the man and did not come close. Into the city's outermost kilometers. Warehouses and hosing projects, vacant lots used as car parks and meeting points for petty commerce. Through gaps in walls, the man could see the dry grassland of the country. He stood below a little figure in red LED, swaying from the traffic sea light, absurd at an intersection between nothing. Hearing a siren, he waited at the curb. It was an ambulance, growing more distant, not the police. When the green figure appeared, the man crossed and went by an alley to a yard with sprawling 2- and 3-story buildings on all sides, graffiti-tied and shored up by trash. Here was a wheelless and dust-coated Dacia under-fringed by weeds, and at the other end of the space, by a closed garage door, the remains of a second, burned-out car. He scanned the windows. He walked without hurrying to the ruin. It had rained hard the night before last, but the stink of carbon and burned plastic was still strong. He took a key from a pocket, unlocked the padlock, and opened the metal door enough to enter, closed it behind himself, and bolted it from the inside. A machine shop led the ground floor. Band saws, hydraulic presses, a lathe surrounded by gleaming coiled flex. A flanger of gray light picked him out from high overhead, where dirty glass had been punched through by a bullet. The four was a foul sastrugi of oil and dust. The clots a drabber black that he knew was blood. You would need specialized expertise to understand that these smears had been shaped deliberately to obscure the story the spoor might tell. He had that knowledge, and he crossed to the tall cabinet of tools in the darkest part of the room. He pulled it away from the wall, uncovering a door. That, too, he unlocked. Behind it was a hidden ladder. He descended. His feet touched down in blackness, and he turned on his flashlight. The ceiling of a tunnel arched a handspan above his head, bare bulbs hanging at eye height, so you'd have to avert your eyes from their glare were every one not shot out. He listened. Drips, faint syncopation, the whispers of settling earth. The man walked, ducking the bulb glass. He turned with the hallway, left through a low threshold into a tiny chamber. He brought his flashlight up in an arc that made the cold mottles of the wall shine. His beam found and followed a path bullets had taken. Holes stamped into the concrete underscored by dark sprays of blood across workbenches, the ruins of laptops, the bodies of 3 men fallen across each other in strange exactitude, their limbs fanned out like those of dancers posing. He smelled causticity under the rot. With his booted right foot he turned over the topmost of the dead and did not stir to see the melted mess where once had been a face, teeth and nose bone, and the ridges of the skull protruding from a crust where ash had bubbled. He met the eyeless gaze. "So," he said. His voice was gentle. He spoke not to the carcass, but to the room itself. "What do you say?" The room withheld. He had known it would. He put his fingers on the wreckage of the body, but what secrets it had were not for him. Back to the tunnel, a second chamber, empty weapons racks. He whispered to them too. A square room, very tall. Faint light down from a hole like a drain above, all the way up into the day, the sky beyond a grill. He let the edges of light come down on him as if he were Bastet in her Luxor temple. Overturned chairs, empty sockets, monitors on the walls, in the center of each a single shot. No computers left behind. Another, larger chamber, double bunks, sleeping for 10 people. Tins on shelves, a fridge, a microwave where 2 walls met. In the opposite corner, a toilet and a shower nozzle over a drain. A rail around the shower head leaned down floorward toward where a plastic curtain lay. A last door in the farthest wall of the room, lying aslant, torn from its hinges, on a slope of fallen dirt. Darkness beyond it, clotted with rubble. The room had been made like a temple, with an offering at its center, a head-height ziggurat of dead. 6 men, 3 women. The man knew that number already. You could not tell from this crude architecture. A cone of limbs and dark clothes, and the remains of faces tangled in the passionless orgy of a graveless mass grave. The dead's shadows crawled away from his light. Not even the posthumous recalcitrance, angular elbow or jutting knee remained to this coagulation, softened in its outlines as it was by secondary coacity and gravity, its edges blurred by that corrosive disguiser of particularities. Amid set slime of flush ash and belts and bergens, bone points and the stubs of broken weapons protruded like karst landscape. The man sat at the table. "What do you say?" he said. The room said nothing. "It would be nice to understand," he said, "at least." He placed the flashlight so it illuminated the dead. He leaned on his elbows and clasped his hands. When he spoke again, if you had heard him, you would not have known what it was he said, though you might have discerned the code shift, a slip from living to long-dead language, and you might have made out that every phrase he spoke was another question. Sometimes he turned off his flashlight and sat in the company of the dark, like the void before and under and after everything. Twice he circumnavigated the room, stepping through blood and spent casings and such. He stood at the entrance to that blocked-off tunnel and considered it a while. He looked at each sleeping space, but he did not lie down or feel under pillows for diaries or love letters. He knew that such searching had been done. He waited, and whatever he hoped for did not come. The man knew it was night when he heard footsteps from the tunnel. He did not turn. He rested his flashlight on its base so the low ceiling glowed and he was underlit. The steps came right behind him and stopped. A voice came from the threshold. "Hey, B." "Hello, Keever," the man said. The newcomer came to stand before him, a dense, muscular man in nondescript clothes. He had close-cropped hair and a deeply lined dark face. "Communing again?" Keever said. Your verb, said the man, not mine. What's yours? B shook his head. I don't have a verb, he said. I can give you a noun, not an English one. Tuska. Sadness, Keever said. You're sad? That's what all this is about? I didn't know you knew Russian, B said. Anyway, I said, Tuska. Sadness. Does an Ariely get it? Keever sat. His eyes went to the broken door and the crammed ruin and earth beyond. He looked then at the pile of dead. You want to talk about it, son? Keever said. It's not news to me that you've been blue. Don't tell me no you haven't. Ever since Olofsson. B did not look up. Hey, Keever said. He pointed at the ragged hem of a hoodie amid the knoll, an unlikely orange, a commemorative garment for some pop group's tour. I remember that. That fucker took a pop at me. That was the head honcho, wasn't it? Blue, B said. I'm not exactly sad, I think. Dot, seeing curious, is closer to it. I'm just... And he shook his head. I'm just trying to hear whatever's there for me to hear. Are you even sure there's a message? Keeber said. No? How did you find me, Keeber? B, come on, this is what, the third time? You're not as mysterious as you think. I never said I was mysterious. Keeber glanced again at that discolored hoodie. B watched him and knew he was bringing to mind the meat smack of bullets, a pull, a headbutt. B's own. So here you are, said B. Keever looked at him, at B's forehead, which had quite exploded the target's skull. B and Keever were very used to silence. Keever sat a while in the cold silver of the flash ashlight. B took in the configurations of death with the exactitude of a scholar. What does it say to you? Keever said at last. B stared into the blackness beyond that last doorway, there under the earth. That's a good question, he said. That's close, Keever, but that's not quite it. He gestured into the dark. It's not that I can read it. If what we leave behind is a text, when we do what we do, it's not in any language I can read, and you can read them all. It's not even that I feel anything in particular, B said, but I do feel like I ought to. You can't keep doing this, son, Keever said. You know the score. Once we've done a sweep, whether it's cleared out or not, it's out of bounds. In, out, no trace. No ID, no FIAG marks wiped off the databases, no fingerprints, spray the enzyme around, no faces dot. He gestured at the cadaver pile. Us or them. Now what if someone clocks a dude like you wandering around? We can't risk you being seen. Or you, B said. You're here, aren't you? You didn't leave me any choice. I'm only here to wag my finger at you. B stood and left the circle of light. Keever, he said, what's the percentage in the unit giving me orders? He did not sound angry. They know I'm not going to obey them unless I want to, in which case I'm not obeying, am I? And they're not orders. They know, you know, I don't care about what they care about. This is an arrangement of convenience, and that's okay. But I don't understand why, given all that, they do this charade, issuing orders, why they make you go through these motions, telling me off. Keever shrugged. Hell if I know, he said. They'd rather have rules I don't care about, B said, and that I break, than not have them at all. Insubordination's a lesser evil than independence, I guess. Like I say, Keever said. I don't know. They say to me, go tell B not to do that again, and unlike you, I do what I'm told. So here I am, orders obeyed. And now what? B said. Keever pursed his lips. I don't know, he said. I thought maybe you could use some company. B pursed his lips too. I don't know if I can, he said. Use it. Well, Keever said, like I say, here I am, wagging my finger. He did so. I'll go report that Subject Unit declined to follow protocols again. You do that." "Be cool," Keever said. He rose and slapped B gently on the shoulder. B paid him no great attention, only listened as Keever receded. Alone, B placed his hand over the flashlight's bulb, and the room grew dark and his hand glowed. He turned when he heard footsteps again, scant minutes thereafter, moving much more quickly than before. He was facing the entrance when Keever came back in. "Message," Keever said. "Came through when I got above ground." "What is it?" B said. Keever gestured at that last blocked-off doorway, the dark and the rubble. "Base is getting hot," he frowned. "They say they're getting a read from one of Thaka's TTE scanners." "What?" "It's gotta be a glitch," Keever said. "It's been cold since ... you know. But they know I'm here and they know you're here." "And what are the odds of that?" B said. "And they want us to check it. What exactly do they say they're getting?" "Look, you know it's a basic signal and it's pretty scrambled even when it's working. What are they getting?" Keever blinked. "Signs of life." For a moment, B held his stare. Then he was at the doorway before Keever even saw him move. Crouched on the fallen door and thrusting his hands across the threshold, and he was pulling and pushing at the ruined supports beyond and yanking the stone-flecked collapsed earth of the blocked-off tunnel and shoving his arms into it in an unsettling parody of surgery. "Slow down," Keever said. "Look, you weren't ... why you were in your zone when it happened. But I'm telling you, I saw it. It wasn't just the collapse. I saw..." He hesitated. "I saw Thaka check out. Him and Grayson both. They were gone. And the signal went out. That had been when Keever, seeing those losses, had sent the grenade underarm right through B's braced legs. As B, dripping, broken rifle E in one hand, broken rifle M in the other, breathing fast like a bull, had stood, he learned, with the darkness of the tunnel and Grayson's and Thaka's bodies beyond him. Keever's grenade had come down, bouncing T-ward the cell leader at the farthest end of that narrow exit tunnel. Last chance to get him, making the tunnel a tomb. "They were dead," Keever said. "Otherwise I would never. Whatever this read is that base is getting now, they were both dead. That's why I brought everything down." Still, B dug. They both knew that those who gave Keever orders would have told him to collapse the tunnel on living comrades if it was necessary. From the tangle and the morass he dragged a wooden erstwhile support and braced himself under weight that no other person could have lifted, and the dust of it gusted around him. He let it fall. "B, it's not stable. ... Keever hesitated. Then he too reached for the metal, and wood interlocked like spillikins beyond the threshold. He pulled and threw behind him what he dislodged. "Easy," Keever said. But B shoved farther into the snarl of matter packing the tunnel, and yanked and threw behind him, back into the chamber. Handfuls of dirt and bricks, and half-bricks blackened with blood from his own hands, which he ignored. He burrowed without words, and Keever dug too, and minutes passed, and the men did not slow, though Keever's breath came ever louder. B tunneled, and Keever did what he could to prop up the way B made. Keever paused at a crepitus of stone as pebbles and rebar came pattering down about him. "God damn it, B. Some of us can die, you know." Keever hunched and went crawling blindly into the dust and gasped, because when he tumbled forward, landing on all fours, he was beyond the blockade, crouched in the shadows and the spectral light of a glow stick in the tunnel beyond. Where stood B, who gestured? At the farthest limits of the phosphor glow, Keever saw a huddled dead man. The target, broken apart. The leader of this group of declared enemies. where they had killed him. Keever's gaze came back along this last tunnel, over the roughened rubble crater and the scorch of his grenade, to another dead man lying on his stomach, Grayson, where a bullet had hit his neck. Keever remembered that abrupt vision in muzzle flash ash. Grayson's arms and legs in a forever dive into death. Shadows and mold upon his skin. Now, there, a third figure. Thaka, slumped against a tunnel wall, his legs crumpled and his back against the concrete, his face twisted to face them, a hole cracking open one side of his head, his mouth bloodied and wide open, his eyes bloodied and wide open, and looking at B and Keever. His eyes moved, his lips moving. Thaka blinked. 2 days before, Keever had seen Thaka die. So then he'd entombed the man's body with a grenade. Now Thaka's mouth formed words. Keever heard his own curse. He was by Thaka's side. He crouched by him, staring into those two wide eyes. "Thaka," he said. "Thaka. Thaka. Man. Thaka. You hear me?" B stood behind him, watching, poised, as if to inflict violence. Keever held Thaka's head, trying not to touch the cavern in the man's eyes. He muttered to Thaka, meeting his eyes, had his hand on Thaka's neck, feeling a strong and lurching pulse. Thaka's skin was cold, but you could feel the warmth of life within him too, tremulous, tentative. "My God, Thaka." Thaka's lips kept moving, but Keever heard nothing. It was only Thaka's lips and eyes that moved. His rifle lay across his lap. "Look at me," Keever said. Thaka looked. His eyes flitted so fast that Keever did not know if the man understood. His own stare went from Thaka's pupils to that off-center hole that changed the contours of his head, mesmerized Keever with the deeps of blood and skull-rimmed hole. "Hey!" Keever called. "B!" B knelt, not looking at Keever or Thaka, putting his fingers into the dirt, bringing his face right down, centimeters over the floor, pulling another glow stick from his belt and breaking it, and placing it close to his own eyes. "What, boy?" Keever said. But Thaka was gasping, and you could hear now that it was not random exhalations, that these were words. He put his ear close to the dry lips. "Came and said so," Thaka whispered. "Rooting right around. I had a dog, so I knew." "Okay, Thaka," Keever said. "Okay, son, just sit tight." He felt in the stiff remnants of the man's uniform for the body scanner that had sent its plaintive, impossible little signal through the earth. "B," he called again. But B had gone to the farthest part of the darkness, beyond the main enemy's remains, right to where the tunnel ended. He held on to stubs of metal in the wall, the same color as the darkness out of which they rose. "Please, B," Keever said. "What day is it?" Thaka said, louder now, a calm, Midwestern voice. "Keever," he said, "it's cold, no? They don't care about you, no disrespect. They don't care about me either." B returned, squatted down a ways away. "Thaka," he said, "what happened?" "Oh," Thaka said. He grimaced and twitched at the sight of B and twisted his face away from him, and it was a horrid thing to see, that expression on his face. "What happened, Thaka?" B said. Thaka licked his lips and shook his head. He kept his eyes on B and whined and whispered, too low for B to hear. Keever lowered his ear to Thaka's mouth again. "I have a dog," Thaka whispered. "My dog came by." A soundless chuckle. "Good boy, there are always questions," he whispered. "But no name, no rank, no number, right? Need to know." Thaka's eyes were still on B, and they grew wider than they should have been able to. The noise he made could have been from a crushed or punctured lung, or it could have been fear.